Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. Alright, so I've been gone for a while, and now I'm finally back. So you may be wondering, okay, now you're finally back, why did you decide to make this, of all things? I mean, my last two videos were the second part in a three-part series, and the first part in a three-part series. So you're thinking, why didn't I get back to those? Well, I just didn't want to make them. Remember, this channel is not monetized. I am making no money from this. Every single video I make is something I want to make. I have never made a video I don't want to make. If I do, then that video is probably going to be lame. I just want to get that out of the way. So yeah, today's video is actually something I'm pretty excited to talk about. I recently finished my Dreamworks marathon, which, no, I didn't watch every single Dreamworks movie. You're not going to get me to sit through Spirit Untamed. And I did the same for Pixar, which, yeah, not I'm going to watch every single one of them. And it got me thinking, I remember some things I've heard some people say, specifically Chaffurl's Productions, which is that even though these studios will probably go on for decades longer, well, some of their movies, you can kind of watch them and think, this could have been the finale. Like, they could have just stopped here and it would have been really satisfying. So I thought, why not make a video about that? I kind of did that for Ninjago. Video you should watch, Ninjago's many finales, which went over how there are multiple seasons where you could say, okay, this is the end of Ninjago. So I think for Pixar and Dreamworks, they each have two films you can look at and say, that could have been it. And it would have felt kind of like a series finale in a sense. So before we begin, like to ask you guys to check out my letterbox, which I'll link down below. And without further ado, let's do it to it and dive on in. Okay, so first movie that could have been a series finale for Pixar is pretty obvious. That'd be Toy Story 3. Because this movie is just... It was the end of Pixar's golden age. A time when, in my opinion, they had produced nothing but... They hadn't produced a single movie that was under an 8 out of 10. Because apparently, I wasn't there for it, but Toy Story 3 was apparently some kind of huge event. I can totally see why. It was the first animated movie to break $1 billion. It was the first Toy Story film in 11 years, and it was number 3, a conclusion of the trilogy. In this era, Pixar began with Toy Story, and so did it end with it. And it wasn't just a finale. It wasn't just a finale to Toy Story. I mean, it isn't anymore, unfortunately, but it was also just the finale of everything that Pixar had been going on at that time. We had been getting movies like Ratatouille, The Incredibles, Monsters, Inc., Wall-E, Up, all the rest. Feels like everything was kind of building to this, where they just really pulled out all the stops for Toy Story 3, as many people would agree. I mean, yeah, these days you do have people who are trying to look at the most minor of details and saying how they completely break the entire experience, even though that is just not true. But I think Toy Story 3 works as a finale for Pixar for more than just it was like the end of this era, but also that just what's in the actual movie just feels like a finale. I mean, it is. So Andy, the toys kid, finally grows up. And the toys have to deal with, okay, now that he's grown up, he's going off to college, what's going to become of us? In a way, it's like the audience who has grown up watching all these Pixar movies thinking, wow, this is kind of it, huh? We've grown up now. What's going to happen with these movies? What's going to happen with us now that we're getting older? Other things about the movie as well? The ending. I mean, it's just, okay. Beyond the fact that the ending of Toy Story 3 is genuinely beautiful and makes me cry every single time, it also works in the same regard of it's saying, okay, the people grew up with this era of Pixar, we had great times with it, but that era is over. But now it's being passed on to a new generation who can enjoy these stories the way we did. Now, granted, Pixar has been very inconsistent ever afterward, but, it's still Pixar at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of also a good way the ending works, which is that, yeah, the toys may have a new owner, Bonnie, and she may not be the same to them as their original owner was, but she is still their kid. They're still going to be there for her, and they know the reason Woody got all the toys donated to Bonnie is because he knew that she would take good care of them. Other things too, like how the movie does a really great job balancing all the drama and humor that we come to know from Pixar. I mean, You've got all the dramatic stuff with Lotso and the prison break and the ending, the incinerator and the emotional goodbye and all that stuff. But then you've also got all the kind of Pixar humor with stuff like Spanish Buzz and Mr. Potato Head and all that stuff. It's really good, you know. I wouldn't quite give this movie a perfect 10. Honestly, I couldn't give any of the Toy Story movies a perfect 10, but this is still a pretty high 9. I still really love Toy Story 3. And yeah, I think if the studio had ended here, we really would have looked at it as just a perfect run of films that did no wrong. If only. Okay, I mean, I'm still glad the studio continued after this, but you know. Other movie I only really thought about while making this is that, I think Coco kind of also have worked as a series finale for Pixar. Yeah, I'm glad the studio continued after this. We got Luca, Inside Out 2, and I'm sure we'll get something. Okay. I've never seen Soul, but I know it has a lot of fans. I do think Toy Story 5 will be okay. I'm actually interested in Gato and Incredibles 3, but about Coco specifically. Okay, one, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the channel before, because when I did do my Pixar ranking, this was one of the Pixar movies I hadn't seen. I've seen it since then, and I can say that I thought it was really good. Not a masterpiece or anything, but, a really solid film. But what I want to talk about is not how much I enjoyed the film, but rather I think all its themes and how it kind of does also work as a finale for Pixar. The movie is original, because the studio was built on creativity, doing new things. So it's cool that if their finale were an original, If Toy Story 3 worked as a finale because it was this grand ending to a great story, Coco works because it's just one last fresh new tale for us to enjoy, huh? So, the movie works on the fact that it's about family, life, death, all that kind of heavy stuff. Reconnecting with your family, seeing your past generations, really embracing your passions, I guess, your creativity, which is what Pixar is built on, like I said before, creativity. It manages to do things that other Pixar movies stink at, like having a good twist villain. I mean, granted, Pixar's worst twist villain wasn't until the movie that came after Coco, but other things like just the whole big creative world it comes up with, and I just think that Miguel just works as the protagonist, just works kind of well in this regard, being this kid who is having to face this big adventure, all this crazy stuff, learning things about his family and all that, and being able to have one ending where he's able to see that he was right to say to his family, "Hey, it's not fair that you said that music was evil and I could never play music." But it was also right. It was also wrong of him to say, "I'm gonna abandon my family, or I don't care if I have to, so I can be a musician." His family was right in the regard of, "Hey, family is important," and they were wrong in the regard of music is terrible and you can never play it. Because I have to say, even though I do think this movie's message works really well, Miguel's grandmother is so mean to him throughout the entire film that it just kind of makes the message not work as well as it probably could have. But yeah, just the whole film is about kind of balance, seeing what your family did before you, honoring them in the modern day, past, present, that sort of thing. Seeing that both Miguel was right for one reason and his family was right for another reason. I just think, and just how the whole film works to the ending, where Miguel is finally able to help his great grandmother remember some things from her childhood about her father, and honoring family and all that. It's kind of a way of saying, Pixar, we look at everything you've done for us. Maybe there are parts of our history we don't want to remember, but all in all, you're still our family. We love you. I think that's just a really nice thing, Okay, now to talk about DreamWorks. Yeah, so as Shafir's production said in his DreamWorks ranking, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World works really well as a finale for DreamWorks, and yeah, one, this gives me an excuse to talk about this movie again, because if you've been following this channel for a while, you know I will take any excuse to talk about this movie. But Beyond the things I always talk about it, like the villain and the animation, the music, and all that sort of thing, I want to talk about why do some people think this works as a series finale for DreamWorks. And I think it does, much like how Toy Story 3 ended with this big emotional goodbye, so does this film. The emotional goodbye exists for a different reason. Toy Story 3's ending was saying, a kid grows up eventually. He'll always have the happy memories of his toys. He's gonna give them up to a new kid, because toys are meant to be played with, and they're fulfilling their purpose in life, and they're sticking together for infinity and beyond, and all that. This movie is about how the memories we've had with each other will always matter. Our friendships and bonds will never die in our hearts anyway, but you do have to say goodbye at some point. There are things that no matter how much you might try to hold on to them, you just have to let go. That's what Hiccup realizes with the dragons. Toothless is his best friend. He's like his brother. He loves him. But he sees that the dragons just have to go, no matter how much he might not want to. One, because there will always be evil people like Grimmel and Drago who will never stop coming for dragons. I mean, 99% of the world still thinks dragons are violent monsters they need to destroy. Two, Hiccup is chief of Berk, and Toothless is king of dragons. They each have roles to play in leading their respective peoples. But if they're so obsessed with the idea of, well, Hiccup anyways, says with the idea of, we're gonna save as many dragons as possible, we're gonna bring in Berk, but no, how are you supposed to run a society when it's constantly getting overcrowded by dragons? It's become basically unlivable for the people of Berk. And they, as Astrid says, they put a bigger target on their backs the more dragons they bring back. And so Hiccup thinks, oh, I know, we'll go find the hidden world, where all humans and dragons will live happily ever after. And then he sees the hidden world and realizes that this world is hidden for a reason. This is a world of dragons. It is meant for them. Humans aren't meant to be here. It's kind of the movie's way of saying that the dream of humans and dragons living together is kind of unattainable. I mean, as Hiccup says that at the end during his final monologue, that, yeah, one day dragons can return in peace, but for now, we have to let go of them, but that doesn't mean all the time we had together won't matter. Kind of what it's saying for DreamWorks, you know? Because the film's credit song is Together from Afar, talking about Hiccup and Toothless have been through it all. They've been everywhere to the stars and back again. Yeah, I know the lyrics. It's kind of like what's saying for DreamWorks, which is that if you've watched all these DreamWorks movies, especially as they were coming out, you've been through a lot. You go from Shrek 2 to Shark Tale. You go from Flushed Away to Shrek the Third. Or, Kung Fu Panda 2 to Puss in Boots, etc., etc. Or my favorite example, the Boss Baby to Captain Underpants. So yeah, it's saying that DreamWorks, we've had a rocky history, you know? But we've still had great times together. And while it may be sad, we're gonna let go of each other. But just like how Hiccup and Toothless do reunite at the end with their families, that doesn't mean they can never see each other ever again. And I think that's really great. Then there's The Wild Robot, which is less than a year old. But the reason I wanted to include this is for a couple reasons. One, this is the final movie from DreamWorks to be exclusively animated in-house. From Dogman onward, all their movies will be... Okay, so the entirety of the pre-production will still be done in-house DreamWorks animation, but they will only be halfway made, like animated in-house. The other half will be outsourced to other studios. But The Wild Robot is the very last one to be done solely in-house. So it really just feels like the people at DreamWorks brought in all the stops. They pulled out everything they had. I mean, for one, it's written and directed by Chris Sanders, a legend of animation, you know. He and Dean DeBlow were the guys behind How to Train Your Dragon, and he worked with Kirk DeMacchio guy to make The Croods, so he's been behind multiple DreamWorks hits before. And having him mastermind his own solo film, because, you know, this is the first movie he's ever done entirely by himself, big thing. The movie continues to evolve the style of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Well, that went through this 2D and 3D crazy painterly aesthetic with flashy action scenes. This continues to have that painterly art style, but it does so in less of a 2D and 3D way. It doesn't have all the flashy action scenes. You're never going to get a scene like Puss in Boots jumping off a bell to hit a giant or something. That's never going to happen in The Wild Robot. And we are getting a sequel to The Wild Robot, but much like the other DreamWorks films that got sequels that are great, it doesn't mean it needed a sequel, because it tells a really satisfying story on its own. And what is that story about? Well, it's about becoming more than your programming and all that. Seeing that you were expected to do one thing, everyone thought you were going to do that one thing, and you ended up proving that you could do way more. Roz is a universal dynamics robot. She was programmed to fulfill any tasks. But she saw that, hey, she could do more than just simply fulfill a task. She could actually get attached to people and things and do a lot more than just what she was programmed for. Bright Bill, he was a runt, as they call him, a goose born with small wings. He could only get so far. As Fink tells him, even if his tells Roz, hey, listen, even if his family had survived, he probably still wouldn't have survived for that long. But through Roz being a mother to him and him getting mentored by all these other animals, he's able to end up doing a lot for the other geese, and he's able to stand on his own 2 feet as a guy everyone respects and appreciates. I think that's also kind of a good way for DreamWorks, you know? DreamWorks, not much I can imagine was initially expected them at first. Yeah, they were founded by Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg, but as many people have said, DreamWorks was founded out of revenge, basically. Jeffrey Katzenberg was furious at Disney when he got fired from him, so he said, hey, I'm going to go start my own company, and I'm going to be way better than you losers at Disney. And yeah, barring my bias that I do prefer DreamWorks, I have to say that the studio was really able to break the mold as more than just a Disney clone. Because, think about it. Even if they have some movies that were kind of similar to what Disney was doing, they weren't doing them in the same way. For example, you have The Prince of Egypt. Oh, it's a big musical, like The Lion King or Aladdin. But it wasn't about and as great as those films are, in fact, I prefer Aladdin to The Prince of Egypt a lot, it's still going for a very different thing. Those were going for these fairy tale stories. The Prince of Egypt is literally based on a biblical story. Like, it's not the same thing. Or you have Shrek, that is a insult to Disney that just has so much fun making fun of fairy tales. But what made Shrek stand out is that it went the extra mile. It didn't just say, we hate fairy tales, you stink, Disney. It was actually telling a real story that may have been subverting fairy tales, but it was still doing something with them. People have said that How to Train Your Dragon kind of feels like a Disney film, but Disney still could never have made it. People say The Wild Robot feels like an early Pixar film, but Pixar could never have made it. Because that's the way The Wild Robot goes, you know? We expected one thing, the people in the movie expected one thing out of its two main characters, but they got something that just went the extra mile instead. And I think for DreamWorks' final film to be a movie about being more than you were programmed to be, so to speak, is just a really great way to finish off the studio. And it's a 10 out of 10 and one of their best films. Well, this is probably in their top 5 most well-loved movies. And I'm glad the studio is still continuing. I really enjoyed Dogman. I'm excited for Bad Guys 2. I do think this would have been a good place to stop. Okay, bonus round. I'm just going to cover Disney really quickly because I don't have much to say about them. I think Wreck-It Ralph and Moana could each kind of work. Okay, one, because I think these are Disney's 2 last good movies. But also, I think, I haven't seen them in a while. I'm going to, though, but I think they work in different ways. So, Moana was the final film of John Musker and Ron Clements, the guys behind Aladdin, Treasure Planet, The Little Mermaid, Great Mouse Detective, Hercules, all those classics. And well, this is their one movie they didn't write, and yeah, it shows it's not as good as some of their other films. It still kind of just carries that magic that people like in Disney. This big adventure, these good, catchy musical numbers, this big, I'm not really sure how to describe it exactly, but it just feels like a good old classic Disney movie, you know? Wreck-It Ralph, I think, works because you have a movie like Aladdin. That was about how this Aladdin guy is more than he appeared. Everyone saw him as a filthy street rat. But he ended up being a really nice guy that was ended up being able to become a prince at the end, basically. The story of Wreck-It Ralph is about how Ralph is a video game villain. Everyone sees him as the bad guy who wrecks the building and that's it. But even though Ralph may be the bad guy, he's not a bad guy. And that's what he's able to prove throughout the movie. I mean, when you meet King Candy, he seems like kind of a mean guy, and yeah, he's revealed pretty quickly to be the film's villain, but he's still, like, the main guy in this video game. Until, of course, we find out that King Candy was not, and that he was actually infiltrating the game the whole time, mixed with his code and all that to make himself the main character. If you've seen Wreck-It Ralph, you know, it's kind of hard to explain. So yeah, it's basically the guy who everyone thought was a bad guy, showing that he is a good guy, and there's no one he'd rather be than himself. Fighting against a guy who everyone saw is just the kind of annoying main character, turns out to actually be a psychopath. I don't know, there's just something about that I really like. Or the final end lines of the film where Ralph looks at Vanellope's game and says, you know, if that little kid likes me, how bad can I be? Kind of like how people look at these Disney films, you know? Like, we say about some of them that, oh, they're just animated, they're just kiddie trash or whatever, but well, it's true that at least a lot of them anyway aren't just kiddie trash. The point is that even if you don't like them, there are other people who still enjoy them, they get a lot out of them, and that is worthy of respect. Okay, so I enjoyed making this video. I doubt it's going to do very well, but it was a video I wanted to make, and like I said at the beginning, I will only make a video I want to make. What will I do next? Probably next part of my series on rewriting the MCU. I'm not sure. I'll see what happens when I get to it. So yeah, that's all for now. And remember to stay way